friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Winter Birds add-on, Our Friendship Grows, A Bug Deal, and Scripty Autumn Sentiments. I stamped my images on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with some Copic markers. I'm going to start with some E50 shades. I'm using E55, E57, and E59, and I'm going to start with the centers of my sunflowers. I did another card not that long ago featuring sunflowers, and I used some E40s for the center on that, which I love, but I wanted to just mix it up and show a different option in case maybe you don't own the E40s or you're just looking for something that's a little bit more vibrant. So I just laid in the E59 on the right hand side, blended out with the E57, and then used the E55 for the highlight. And then I did do 2 layers just to really increase that saturation and smooth out that blend. And then I will be coloring the additional images on that separate piece of cardstock off screen. I did want to share the inspiration for this card though. I recently received this beautiful handcrafted birdhouse from a patient of my husband's, and I just thought it was so beautiful, and I wanted to create a thank you card for her inspired by the birdhouse that she made. So I kind of pulled all of my images from my different Lawn Fawn sets to try to create something that kind of resembled this beautiful gift. I did want to add a little bit of fall to this card as well though, so I did add some of those brown tones onto the leaves. I took away the E59 and added in the E53, and now I'm also adding in the E51 to do the birdhouse. So the birdhouse that she created was in this beautiful brown tone, so I wanted to color the birdhouse to match. So I'm adding that E57 up under the roof line where that would cast a shadow, and then a little shading to define each of the sides. And then I'm blending out with the E55, and I will then bring in the E53, just pulling that color in toward that center, and I'm also filling in the center while I color the outer edges. I am going to change that up in a minute though, because I didn't want it to look too similar to the outside of the birdhouse. So I filled in the rest of the space with the E51, and then I pulled that E59 back in, and I'm going to do a second layer on that inner part of the birdhouse, starting with that, and then blending out with the E57 and the E55, and then a little E53 to finish that off. I'm also going to do the tree branch that is from Winter Birds, and I'm going to color that in starting with the E59 once again. I will say that very little of this is going to end up showing. I'm using this as the stand for the birdhouse, and I ended up hiding most of it behind the grass, so I really could have just colored a little sliver of it and it would have been fine, but that's alright. I wasn't sure how much of it I would use until I got to actually building the scene. So for the roof and the base, it's kind of like a creamy white. So I went with E40, E41, and E43. And I am going to leave a little sliver of white space at the very top of that as well, just to make it a little bit brighter on that top edge. Moving on to my sunflowers, I pulled out Y13, YR21, YR24, and YR27. So that YR27 is very dark. It's almost like a rusty orange shade, but I just really wanted to add a little extra depth to my sunflowers, and I'm pretty sure I didn't go quite this dark on the previous card that I made. So I just wanted to give you guys, again, another option, a different way to color them. So I'm just laying that in on the center and base of each of the petals of the sunflower, and also on each of the back petals that are on the underside. And then I'll blend that out with the YR24. Just making sure to catch the edge of that YR27 and pull it into this middle shade so that I get a nice smooth blend on each of those petals. I don't want to have any rough lines showing if I can help it. So once I have that YR24 laid in, I'll bring in the YR21 and take that up even further. And I'm going to fill in the petals that are on the underside that you only see a little corner of completely with that YR21, just to give them a little bit more of a shaded look since they would not be getting as much light on them. But I am leaving some white space on all of the other petals so that I have room for that Y13, which is going to really transform these sunflowers because it's a nice, warm, bright, sunshiny yellow, and it's really going to lift those sunflowers off the page and make them light and bright at the tips. I'm making sure that when I color over the YR21 that I just kind of scribble over that a little bit again so I get a nice smooth blend between those YR shades and this Y shade. So just filling that all in, and yeah, I really like how these turned out. I think they're really pretty and they definitely give me those fall vibes. While I have these markers out, I will also throw some of that color onto my fall leaves. I have been really loving this Scripty Autumn Sentiment set lately. I've been using it quite often. You're going to see another card next weekend that uses it as well. I just really have been enjoying it. I love the size of the leaves in this set, and I love the large Scripty sentiments. And I've been having so much fun coloring my leaves in all different color combos. Next, I'm going to bring in R43 and R46, and I'll color in my little ladybug. And even though there's not a ladybug on the birdhouse that this lovely lady made for me, I just thought it'd be nice to have a little pop of red on the card, and I wanted to incorporate that into my fall leaves as well. And when I was pulling out the larger leaves to stamp out for the sunflowers, because the larger leaves in our Friendship Grows actually don't have dies for them, so I'm replacing those with the ones from A Bug Deal. And I just happened to see that ladybug and thought, oh, that might be fun to add to this card just for another little pop of red on the scene, and you know, just to have another little critter there as well. So I used those two shades on the leaves and the ladybug. And then I just smooth the transition area between the red and the yellow with that Y13 once again. For the sunflower leaves, I'm bringing in G20, G21, G24, and G28. I'm putting that G28 at the base of each of the leaves and going up the center line a little bit, and then blending out on either side with the G24. And then I will add in a little bit of the G21. You could skip it if you wanted to, but I really love having a little of that G20 on the edges because it's light and bright, but it's a little bit hard to blend it with the G24, so that's why I did add in that fourth shade with the G21. And the G21 doesn't blend that well with the G28, so that's why I did use all four shades. And then on the base of the birdhouse, she had a little bluebird sitting on a chair. So I decided to do a bluebird as well. I'm using B21, B23, and B24. And I'm going to try to create a blue jay. So I used the B24 at the back of the tail, the bottom edge of the wing, and the top of the head. And I'm blending toward the belly. Then I'm going to bring in B000 to pull that color even further and to help me transition into the next shades, which is going to be that E40. And I will just add a little bit of that on the chest area and then also on the face, blending in a little of that B000 as well. Next, I'll bring in T1, T3, and T5, and I'm going to do the beak and also the face of the ladybug with these 3 shades, just starting with the T5 at the bottom and blending toward the top with the T3 and then the T1. And then I'll also bring in the T7 and add a little bit of darkness on the edge of the wing, tail, and the top of the head. Blend that out with the T5 and a little of the T3 as well. And then I'll bring back that B21 to just help blend over that transition area back into the blue. I'll add some rosy cheeks to my bird and my ladybug with RV11. And then I decided that I did need a bow on my birdhouse since there was such a nice fluffy one on the actual birdhouse. So I stamped one out from Christmas Dreams, and then I'm just going to trim these all out with their matching dies. So I needed to create some stems for my sunflowers since our Friendship Grows doesn't have stem dies for it. So I'm just going back to some of the colors that I used on the leaves, the G28, G24, and G21, and I'm coloring those onto an extra piece of cardstock. And you can see that my G28 is now running dry, so I'm definitely going to have to refill it. It's not very smooth at all, but it's going to be such a small sliver that it's not going to be a big deal, and a lot of that dark color will be hidden behind the grass. Then I'm going to take this die that is meant to be the string of the ornaments from the Winterbirds add-on, and I'm just going to trim out a couple of stems for my sunflowers from that. Next, I'm going to work on my focal panel. I'm taking a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and the Lawn Fawn Cloudy Stencil, and I'm going to blend on some Distress Oxide Ink. And I decided to go with Broken China today. I thought it matched the blue in the little bird very nicely, and it's one that I haven't used in a really long time. It used to be a favorite, but yeah, I just haven't brought it out in a while, and I'm so glad I did because it is such a pretty blue shade. So I'm making sure to start on the edge of my stencil and get the more saturated color right as I leave the edge to really define those clouds. And then I use softer pressure as I go up that panel so that it gets that nice dreamy cloudy look. And I'm going to do 3 different cloud formations, just turning that stencil around each time to make sure that each one looks a bit different. And that's about as far down as I need to go because I'm going to have 2 layers of grass down at the bottom. But I did want to add a little extra color down on the white cardstock just so that last row of clouds isn't so bright white. And once I'm happy with that, I wanted to do a little bit of splatter. So I'm going to press that Broken China ink onto a block. Add a little bit of water to that, mix it up with a paintbrush, and then splatter that all over the background. I'm using a really fine paintbrush because I like fine splatters, and I'll just continue to tap that off the edge until I have a look that I like. And then I will set this panel aside to dry. Then for the grass hills, I'm going to use the Slimline Stitch Hillside Borders to trim those down. You can use the regular ones, I just don't have them, and the Slimline do double duty. So I'm going to start with the larger of the 2 hills, and the first shade I'm going to add to that is Twisted Citron. And I always like to be really careful with those grasses. I don't want them to get bent, so I start a little bit lower on the panel. And then I'm going to bring in some mowed lawn to darken up the bottom edge of that. And I'll just work my way back and forth between these 2 shades, layering on that ink until I have a look that I like. And I have a vibrancy level that I like, and that everything looks nice and smooth between the 2. And then once I'm happy with that, I'll set that aside for a moment and work on the shorter panel. This time I'm going to use the mowed lawn up at the top. I wanted these 2 panels to look a bit different. And I'm going to darken up this one with Rustic Wilderness. So I'm going to add that down at the bottom and just make sure that it looks quite a bit darker than the one above. and work my way back and forth between those two inks as well. Once I'm done with that, I want to do some splatter on these as well, but I'm just going to use the darkest and the lightest, so the Twisted Citron and the Rustic Wilderness, and I'll just mix that up with a little bit of water and splatter that all over both panels once again. Didn't show up that well on the lighter panel just because it's very similar to the color that it ended up being, but it looks nice on the darker green, I think. So I'll mix up the darker green as well and splatter that one all over, and there you can see it is super fine drops. If you want something a little bit larger, you can use a slightly larger paintbrush. Also, you have more round droplets if you tap it off the edge of something like a block or your finger. If you just kind of shake it in the air, you'll get more elongated drops. So it just depends on the look you're going for. So I set those aside to dry as well, and in the meantime I'm going to stamp my sentiment onto that panel, and I'm using Thanks from Me to You, stamping that in VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I will stamp that down twice to get a nice bold impression, and then I'll set that aside to dry because that ink does take a little while. And then I'll pop a card base in my MISTI. I'm using Lawn Fawn Mermaid cardstock and Fish Tank ink. And on the inside, I'm stamping I'm so very grateful, and then a little swoosh and an extra little leaf there. So now I'm ready to start assembling. I'm going to take that cloudy backdrop and glue that to the front of my card base. I am making an A2 standard size card, so it's 4 1/4 tall by 5 1/2 wide. And then I'll glue my bigger green base down flat to the card. And then I'll add the shorter green grassy hill with some foam tape to pop that up and give it a bit of dimension. And then I can bring in my images and start to kind of figure out where I want things placed. I'm going to work on my sunflowers first. I want the larger one plus one of the small ones over on the left, and then another small one over on the right. And then in between those, I'm going to leave some space for my birdhouse. I'm going to add the flower stems underneath the large sunflower, and then also the one on the far right, the one that is kind of toward the middle, ended up being so short that I didn't even need one for that because its stem would have been completely hidden by the grass. And once I was sure that I had those where I wanted them, I'm just going to peel off the release paper from the foam tape that I added to the back of the sunflowers and pop them down into place. And I'm making sure to kind of layer the two sunflowers over on the left to make them look, like they're growing close together. Just give it a bit more of a natural look. I'm going to add some liquid glue to the back of that tree branch and then tuck it under the grass. And then I'll pop the birdhouse up on foam tape right over top. And I ended up needing to adjust that. I stamped the sentiment slightly lower than I meant to, so I didn't have quite as room as I had left in my design when I originally laid out this card idea. So I just had to put it lower in the scene, so I had to trim off a little bit extra of that branch, which is why you don't see very much of it anymore. Then I'm going to take some of those leaves and pop those up on foam tape as well. And again, I'm letting one of those leaves even cover part of the sunflower just to make it look a bit more natural. I'll tuck some of the leaves back behind and just try to do my best to fill in the scene and make it look really nice and full like a field of sunflowers would be. And I did use foam tape for most of my images, but I added a few with liquid glue as well, just to vary the dimension in the scene and really create more interest. So next I'm going to take that bow, and I can't add it the way she did, kind of coming out of the center of the birdhouse, but I did add it down at the bottom just so it would be tied in somewhere, and I really like how that looked. And then I'll just tuck the bird back behind the strings of the bow. And then I just wanted to figure out the placement of my fall leaves. I wanted to look like they were kind of blowing around the scene. I added another green leaf down at the base of the large sunflower, and I also wanted to add in my ladybug, and I wanted to have a little pop of red down at the bottom left, so I decided to add that at the base of the large sunflower. And I'll also glue the 2 leaves that are going to be scattered across the grass down with liquid glue, just trying to decide the placement that I wanted those to lie in. And then the final leaf, which is going to go up at the top right to accent the sentiment, I wanted to pop up with some more foam tape. So I'm just going to tear off a little piece and add that behind and then pop that into place. And then of course I wanted to add some sparkle, so I'm taking some of my favorite Stardust stickles and adding that to my sunflower centers right where the darkest shading is. I'll also add a little bit to each of my leaves, kind of spreading that around the center in a light coating. And I also added it to the bow, and I didn't realize until after I was done filming that I'd smeared a little bit of ink next to the T, but I just took my Tombow Mono sand eraser and was able to remove that very easily, which you can see in the final photos. But there is an up-close look at the card and another peek at the inside. I really hope that she likes this thank you card, and I so appreciate the gift that she gave me. I thought it was so thoughtful. And I love that her creation inspired me to create as well. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. All of the products that I used today will be listed and linked for you down below in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. And I'll also include 2 extra videos at the end here in case you'd like to keep watching. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.